The Hangar Z Podcast welcomes Chief Ed Delmore and Chief Scott Hughes.
The first thing is admit that you know nothing about what you're getting ready to step into. Don't come in there acting like you know what you don't know. These men and women have been doing this for who knows how long. They're used to this rotation. They might be looking at you as this is just a stepping stone. You're only in aviation because you're trying to get here. This is where the opening is, and seniority put you here, blah, 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 blah. The same thing I would tell folks who want to become chiefs, want to promote. Go in there and be a sponge and soak it all up. Take it all in. And someone told me this one time. They said, Chief, let's build on your sponge theory. After you've set that sponge down there for 30, 60, 90 days, take that sponge and wring it out and put the sponge back out and soak up another 30 or 45 days worth of stuff.
Welcome back to the Hangar Z Podcast, where we continue our ongoing series of conversations of leadership in law enforcement. In this episode, we're joined by two exceptional leaders, Chief Ed Delmore of the Pelham Police Department and Chief Scott Hughes of the Hamilton Township Police Department. Both chiefs bring decades of experience and proven track record that led them to the highest levels of leadership within their organizations. Beyond the badge, they are also thoughtful voices in the profession, having authored numerous articles on leadership, current events in law enforcement, and tactical considerations. Today, we dive deep into two of those articles and use them as a springboard for a wide-ranging discussion. We explore leadership philosophies, the importance of training, protecting your people, maintaining standards, retention and recruitment, and what it truly means to lead from the front. Chiefs Delmore and Hughes speak candidly about standing for what's right, applying common sense to leadership, and refusing to tolerate toxic behavior within the ranks. This is an honest, insightful conversation with two chiefs who lead with courage, integrity, and clarity of purpose. No matter your role in law enforcement, there is something to learn from these two incredible leaders. Thank you to MHM Publishing and the Vertical Helicast podcast platform for making all of this possible. Please continue to like, subscribe, and share the Hangar Z Podcast. Thank you to our sponsors, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, CNC Technologies, and Metro Aviation.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and partnered with Vertical Valor Magazine. I'm your host, Jack Shanley. With me today is the creator of the Hangar Z Podcast, John Gray. John, are you ready to talk leadership today?
Yes, sir. This is a conversation that's really been highlighted throughout every conversation I think we've had on the Hangar Z Podcast. Yeah. You know, we're always looking for inspiration from leaders like the guests we have today, and get the insight that's so crucial for our industry to get better. You know, leadership's been identified along with mental health as two of the things that I think that we can find the most improvement in. So really excited to hear and get the insight from our guests today and on how effective leadership really impacts law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all four of us on this podcast today get to travel a little bit in different capacities, training, podcasting. We travel all over the United States and even around the world. And it's amazing how consistent the complaints about leadership are. And both our chiefs that are with us today are both very respected chiefs. And I'll just, before I introduce them, I'm just going to say that how this came to be is that I was reading some things about leadership, including an article written by Chief Hughes, who's one of our guests today. And I immediately thought about Chief Delmore as I was reading it, because I've known Ed for many years. I have never met Chief Hughes, but what he was writing resonated. And I went, that is dynamite. Why don't all chiefs believe that and act that? I know Ed does. So I called Ed, and here we are. He called Scott, and we're together to talk about a very important topic. I mean, as I've traveled around and taught, I can tell you that there not every chief is like the chiefs we're going to talk to today. They are out there. I can think of a couple off the top of my head. Scott Freeman from Conyers, Georgia, very much a leadership leader. In that same county, Rockdale, Sheriff Eric Levitt, no nonsense, law and order every time. I mean, very leadership oriented. But there's a lot of chiefs that need help in this, and it has nothing to do with size of department. And I want to touch on that as we get in here. You know, the very large departments have chiefs that maybe everybody recognizes their face or their names, but that doesn't mean that they're good leaders. And some of the best leaders are from all sizes departments. And our listeners are going to learn that today very quickly. Both of our guests have very great philosophies. So let me start by welcoming our guests. Today we have Chief Scott Hughes from the Hamilton Township Police Department in Ohio. Chief Hughes, welcome to the Hangar Z.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Scott. We really appreciate you coming. And Chief Ed Delmore from Pelham, Alabama PD. He's been around. He's going to tell us about these other departments, but he's fairly new yet to Pelham, Alabama PD. Ed, welcome to the Hangar Z.
Thank you. Nice to be here. At my age, it's kind of nice to be anywhere.
Don't remind me about that because I'm in that boat. It is great to be somewhere. So let's kick right in. We're going to cram as much stuff into this 2 hours as possible. And I'm going to throw you a softball to start. And I want each of you to provide us with kind of an overall leadership philosophy, a clear, concise overall leadership philosophy that you have and that you've had, not just as a chief, but as you move through the ranks. Chief Hughes, we'll start with you.
You threw me a softball question. I'm going to throw you a softball answer. Remember where you came from. Period. Podcast over.
Yeah.
I mean, if
drop the mic.
Yeah. I mean, if leadership would just remember where they came from, remember what it was like to put this uniform and put this vest on and wear all this stuff. If you remember that, you're going to be fine. You opened with all these problems we have in this profession with leadership, and I, like you, travel around the country. I speak, I teach, I consult, and I always say it's the same crap, different patch, right? Yeah. It's the same nonsense going on, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that as you get promoted, you get further and further and further and further and further removed from the folks out there doing the real work on the street. Naturally, right? You move up, there's different responsibilities. But, and you said, doesn't matter department size, and I agree. The higher up you go, you can still stay connected, right? I'm not coming out here every night working 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, but I make a point to be visible at roll call. I make a point to be visible on the holidays. I text people on their birthdays, just little things, right? Just treat people the way you want to be treated. So folks who can remember where they came from are going to be much more successful than those that forget where they came from, because then you become unrelatable. And when you're unrelatable, people can't connect. And, we can talk about trust and all that, later on, but it, in my opinion, it all comes down to never forgetting where you came from and what got you to where you are today.
Such a simple idea and philosophy that so many do not follow. And everybody here knows that. I mean, we know chiefs and supervisors that do not follow that. And it is simple. If you follow that, the rest falls into place. I love the simple stuff.
Yeah.
That's great stuff, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah.
Real quick, you touched on the small things. And I think a lot of times people focus on this grandiose thing, this vision they've got to make their agency better or wherever they work better. But in reality, I think oftentimes it's those small things, the text that you mentioned, texting somebody, writing a note to somebody, thanking them for the job they did, wishing them a happy birthday. Those little small things done consistently over time really, I think, affect positive leadership, whether you're a chief, a police officer, whatever your role is. Those small things go so far. So love to hear that.
Yeah. And I wish I could sit here and say I do it every day all the time. I'd be lying to you if I did. But to your point, if I can do it enough to where folks know I care about them, then we're making progress. I just over here, you can't see it off screen, but I have 4 books that are left over. Every Christmas, I buy every member of my staff a book, and a gift card to a local restaurant. The book has something to do with leadership or something to do with the profession. And it's little things like that. You buy these things throughout the years. You don't have to spend all that money in the 1st of December. You buy it over the year, let it build, and you give them that for Christmas. It just shows me you care about them. You're investing in them. It's those little things that make that difference.
Fantastic. What a great idea. Great idea. Chief Delmore, same thing. Just your philosophy.
Well, unfortunately, I have to say that I learned more about what not to do in leadership than I ever learned about what to do. And those very few people, I can count them on one hand, that I considered my mentors. Those are just guys. There weren't a lot of gals back then that I just copied and watched what they did, and then tried to perform that same way. And along the lines of what Chief Hughes said, right now I'm in a department where I'm kind of changing the culture. We are changing the culture from being a more reactive agency to a more proactive agency, and just sending out a message. Hey, I saw that pop you made last night with that methamphetamine. Great job. Continue to do that. Those are things that I never experienced when I was on the street making cases, with a few exceptions. But sometimes it was, not anything that was recognized. And we have to do better with that. One of the programs that I do traveling around the country lecturing is talking to senior command level officers about how you better be paying attention to the things that are still going on the street. You get to a certain level in any size organization and you start dealing with the politics and the over the horizon things. But if you don't pay attention to the tactics that your officers are using, the equipment that they're using, the emerging trends that are going on, and really what's going on in their world, you're going to get in trouble, and your agency's going to get in trouble, and maybe your cops are going to get hurt too.
Yeah. Very, very good. And I know this about you, Ed, and I know from reading many of your articles, Scott, that both of you make a point of being out there with the troops a lot. I mean, being out there, where they're doing their job, and that is so important. There are leaders that do not do that. They say, "Oh, I'm just too busy for that." Well, then you're missing the point of what the department does. I love that you both are doing that.
When I first started here, to Ed's point right there, and to your point, Jack, when I first started here, I was in the police car a lot. I mean, a lot. Over time, that has decreased, and it's only been able to decrease because we've changed the culture, right? I'm getting ready to go into my 10th year as the chief. I don't have to be out like I used to. My wife has other plans, okay? But it wasn't uncommon early on, the first 4, 5, 6 years here. It's Friday nights, it's New Year's Eve, it's Thanksgiving Eve, it's all the days where, while a lot of folks are off, I'm here because I was trying to build that culture and establish the culture and get the morale up. Sounds like a lot probably what Ed's dealing with now. So anyone who's listening who knows me, especially here, knows I don't get to do as much as I used to, and I miss it. But that doesn't mean that we don't get out at all, right? I mean, the little things are just wearing the uniform. Just wearing the uniform goes so far with people because you're one of them, right? You can relate. So I just want to throw that out there.
No, thanks, Scott, for adding that, because that's I love what you said there, that you don't have to be there. The culture recognizes what you're doing. They trust you. You built that. You don't have to be out as much, but you still go out. That's important.
And you build up your number 2, your number 3s, your number 4s to where they're carrying on whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You don't have to be here, right? I don't need to be here 80 hours a week like I did, because I've got competent people now in place doing competent things that they don't need me here. I don't have to have my finger on the pulse like I used to. And it took time, but man, I tell you, once you get that culture where you want it, there's no better feeling. There really is not a better feeling in the world.
Yeah. And I know, Ed, you, as new as Pelham is to you, I know you can relate to exactly what Scott's talking about from Gulf Shores. You went through that there, and I know the evolution at Gulf Shores. mean, very similar. Scott's describing Gulf Shores in your situation. To a T.
Yeah, exactly. And, even in the 10 months here, initially it was strange to see the faces of the officers when the chief showed up to cover them on a car stop or on a routine.
Love that.
A phrase we don't like to use, call. It's not that unusual anymore.
Yeah.
And it's not unusual to hear me on the radio. And one of the things I like Scott did when we first started talking today is he tapped his chest and said, wearing the uniform, wearing the vest. Yeah. Well, I wear that vest too. Why? Yeah. Because I expect my people to wear that vest. Yeah, and right. So just because I'm in an administrative assignment, this is a mid-sized town, suburb of Birmingham, but if something big breaks, I'll be there. Sure. And I'm not going to have time to put on that armor.
That's right. You might be grabbing a corner on a perimeter. You might end up on a search team.
That's exactly right.
Active threat. Both of you might end up on that active threat. I mean, and you're leading by example. Another simple thing. Remember where you came from? Lead by example. Simple things that mean a lot to the street cop. I mean, they just look at you differently if you're following those rules. Love it.
That relatability is so important. I can think of the last chief that I worked under before I retired. The first time I heard, after he got promoted to chief, the first time I heard him go on a traffic stop, I was shocked. Heard Adam 1 traffic over the primary. I'm like, holy cow. And everybody started talking about it right away.
Yeah.
And everyone realized, hey, he's relating to what we do. He understands our mission and he's one of us.
Yeah.
That's so important. And I reflect on a whole totally different circumstance where I had recently gotten promoted to corporal. I had come in from the field after I think I had done a narcotic search on a vehicle. My uniform was a mess because I'd been on my knees underneath the car doing everything I could to find some dope, which I don't think I found, by the way. But I come into the station and I don't look like I should, right, as a corporal. And I got dressed down by a newly promoted lieutenant for looking the way I did. And granted, I should have a nice looking uniform, but he didn't realize what I had just done and why I looked the way I did. Yeah. So the fact that you guys are out there backing folks on traffic stops, being relatable, man, that's huge. And I think for our newly promoted chief pilots or unit supervisors, if you're a pilot or a TFO and you have the ability to go work the line as either an acting TFO or a pilot, get out there and do that. I know that the administrative taskings make it hard sometimes to do that. That relatability that Ed and Scott are talking about is so important.
It is.
Please get out there and fill those slots.
Absolutely. So important. The view of it, just the perception by the troops is just, that perception is important. Even if their perception might be completely wrong about you, but it's still a perception that can linger and can affect other things. So doing little things like that, really valuable.
Thank you to our sponsor, AEM. Their revolutionary MTP 136D P25 aerial firefighting radio is U.S. Forest Service approved. It's in stock and ready to ship. Grounded unexpectedly? No problem. AEM stocking dealers across North America are prepared to support all your mission critical needs. Visit aem-corp.com/radio.
Well, it builds trust. And, we say in our classes, trust is the backbone of all relationships. Without trust, you don't have anything.
Right.
So it takes time, especially in a new culture. It takes time to build that trust and get them to trust you, especially like Ed and I, who came in from the outside where people didn't know us, right? There's none of this, I remember when you were a sergeant, they don't know who we are. So we came in from the outside. So you have to earn that trust. And it takes time, which is another reason why you had to be here 80 hours a week, because you're trying to establish all those relationships with all the different folks.
Ed, let me go back to you and ask, and then I'm going to come to Scott with the same question, because I think this fascinates me of your opinions, because I was a police officer when I came on the job, and I was a police officer when I left the job. I never promoted for a lot of reasons, so I can't directly relate to this, but both of you can. How much of your leadership skills and your abilities now was learned through training, like classes, books, articles, versus just your background experience and your personality? What do you think the percentages are there for that sort of thing, Ed?
I'd say 90-10 experience, 90% experience, 10%, or maybe even less of the classroom stuff. I mean, I've been to the FBI National Academy. I've been to the Southern Police Institute. I have the graduate degree, which beneficially for me was the program I went to was on an Air Force base. And so in all those programs, the academic part was a little bit, but I learned so much more in talking to the other leaders that were in the room, including the military NCOs and officers who were just in that program, needed that box check to promote or get out. That's where the real value was. And I'm not shy about saying it. We've all met a lot of idiots with master's degrees and PhDs. And, as cops, our people get their PhDs on the street.
Yeah. Let me hone that down to even more specific. Your personality now, besides the experience and background that you just talked about being 90%, what about your personality? How does that affect your leadership today?
Well, I think I've been seen as fairly linear. If I want us to get to a particular place, we're going to go there. And I like to think I've been seen as somebody who's going to defend my cops, unlike situations that I had been in before where, the chief or whomever would capitulate to the politicians. I haven't been shy about standing up for cops, not just on a local level, but on a national level when certain things come up, as you have seen.
Sure.
And that's that. I've paid a price for that, but I make no apologies for it either. None at all. I
like that. Scott, same thing. Talk about that topic.
Yeah. Can I say ditto?
Sure.
Yeah, ditto. I agree. It's funny. Ed and I are so much alike. I mean, he's a lot older than me, obviously, but we're so much alike. And I had to get that in, Ed, with that mustache. But
true.
Ed started off talking about how he kind of came up and saw kind of what not to do. And in some ways I was exposed to that as well. And, I've surrounded myself with some really good mentors people that I've trusted. And I tell anybody who asks my opinion on what it takes to be a good chief or a good leader, you got to find a mentor. You got to find somebody you trust. There isn't anything that hasn't happened that somebody else has already gone through. So learn from their mistakes or learn from their successes. As far as personality goes, sometimes we say this in our courses too, right? You have enemies. That means you stood up for something in your position. And again, I'd be lying to you if I said everybody loves me, because there are some people that, I probably don't have the pain of me. And I would argue it's because of their own doing, but they're never going to see it that way. So, it's no sense to argue that. The flip side of that is there's a lot of people that are like, man, I'd love to work for that guy. I wish our chief was like that. If you paid more money, if you were located in this state, if you did this, we would come work for you in a heartbeat. And that's what makes me proud, right? I'm not going to make everybody happy, never will. But if I keep the majority happy, that's great. And someone told me a long time ago in a very stern conversation, it was one of my bosses. He told me, he said, Scott, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And as you work your way up through the ranks, you have to adjust your personality and your style with the people that you're dealing with, which takes me back to what I said before about really getting to know your people, knowing how to deliver different messages and in what tone really helps you get that rapport and get that trust. Again, sometimes you're having a bad day, you just come across a certain way, it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
You can recover, you can apologize, you can say, hey, my bad, it's not how it was meant to be. But there are times where, you may have to be stern. There are times you don't have to be. But again, I think one place is where sometimes leadership fails is they can't make those adjustments. So then they either rub people the wrong way all the time, or they don't get buy-in because they can't be stern enough, or maybe there's too much gray. They don't understand what the message is. So nothing really sinks in with them if I'm explaining it the right way.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's what kind of worked for me.
Oh, great.
Could I just add, Jack?
Sure.
When I was a kid, I was a baseball player I was a mediocre baseball player on a really good baseball team with a lot of talented baseball players. And even though I was mediocre, because I played with those guys, I was better. And I think cops want the same thing. Good cops want to work with other good cops. And I recall a conversation when I was a deputy chief and I was counseling a guy who was a basically retired on duty turd who never did anything. And he said, well, Delmore, you have your cliques. And I said, what do you mean? Define what you mean. And he said, well, you just have these guys that you take care of. And I said, okay, who are you talking about? And he gave me the names, and I said, what do all those guys have in common? And he said, I don't know. And I said, I'll tell you what they have in common. They all work. Yes. They're out there making cases. They're all taking defendants to jail. They're out there doing police work while you're hanging out at 7-Eleven with a big gulp.
Yep.
So if you're going to accuse me of having that kind of clique, I'll own that.
Yes, good. We've all heard that one, huh?
Yeah. That self-reflection is so important in your career development. Whether as a leader or anything else, somebody said once, you're the sum of the 3 people that you hang out with. And if you look at those 3 people that you surround yourself with and they're all at 7-Eleven eating hot dogs and drinking sodas all day at work, then you're that's what you are, versus Ed, what you're saying. So I love that. I think that's huge. That self-reflection is so important.
Yeah. In one of your articles, Scott, we're going to talk about that article in detail here in a minute. I won't dive too deep yet, but you talked about that type of cop, the toxic and lazy cop, and how, you've got to deal with them. You've got to either correct it or, you got to try and fix it. Otherwise it's like a cancer.
What I told you a second ago, there's some people that don't like me. I'll let you guess what category they fall into.
I got a feeling I know.
They may be at a 7-Eleven as we speak.
Yes, I understand. Oh, wow. Well, that was a great leadership intro. We're going to dive deeper, but before we do that, I wanted to start with people hearing you and going, oh, I want to hear more from these two because you're on solid leadership ground, and I really admire both of you so much for that. But let's learn a little bit more about you. So, Chief Delmore, give us that overview of your career and how you got to where you are here in Pelham.
Well, as Scott has already kindly pointed out, I'm Jurassic Cop. I've been doing this a long time.
It's going to take a while.
So, but Jack, like you, I became interested in law enforcement when I was less than 10 years old, watching Adam 12 on TV. Yep. That's what did it. And that's what did it for a lot of people our age. And then I was fortunate to find out that my home city department in a suburb of St. Louis had a police explorer program. So I joined that and did that for a few years. And then when I was a senior in high school, I got hired by another St. Louis suburb, small suburb, but busy suburb, as a dispatcher. So I went to high school in the morning and then worked 4 to 12 at the police department my senior year, and my grades suffered accordingly. Graduated by the skin of my teeth. But then that led to my department actually allowing me to go to the police academy using sick time and comp time and vacation that I had accumulated, paid my own way through it, but on their time, really. And then right after I graduated, I started as a policeman, although I was still 20 when I graduated, and I couldn't go on the road until I was 21. So I had to wait 3 weeks to go on the road. So literally the day I turned 21, I became a commissioned policeman. Wow. Worked in another suburb for a couple of years, then went to a bigger suburb of St. Louis, patrol officer there, kind of a field training officer, although it wasn't real formalized like it should have been. Then in 1989, I went into an undercover unit that was under the auspices of the Illinois State Police. Did that in 1989 and 1990, which was great fun. I did all the things that at least a male agent does undercover. I grew my hair long. I got an earring. I got divorced. Not that I'm bitter about it. If I was bitter about it, I'd dwell on it. Anyway, I lived in the projects for 3 years because I didn't have any money because I had to buy her out of my pension. But again, I'm dwelling on it. So anyway, got promoted out of that unit and became a patrol sergeant. And it was about that time we hired a police chief who, interestingly enough, had come to us from Minneapolis. And he was a cop's cop. And he's the guy who, And we may get into more of this later, I'm sure, but he's the guy who really I credit with me being a police chief now. He changed our organization, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself necessarily, and big impact on me. Anyway, sergeant for several years, got the opportunity to run an interstate drug interdiction unit where we took off big loads of dope traveling on the interstate highway system. Interstate 55, 44, and 70 all went through the city I was working in. So a lot of the dope that was going from the southwest, going to the north and northeast was coming through, the dope money typically going the other way. And because we got pretty good at that, I got picked up to teach, and that's when I started on the national lecture circuit, teaching that program. Through a series of flukes, became a deputy chief in '96 on that agency, retired there at a very young age, Scott, and became the police chief back in the other suburb where I had been an explorer. So now I'm the police chief, working with guys that I had ridden with when I was 15 years old. Wow. And, they'd seen me as this 15-year-old twerp, and now I'm working with them as a police chief. Did that for 5 years. And then at that point, I had 30 years in Illinois, got tired of Illinois politics and Illinois winters, but it was also a math question from a pension standpoint, and accepted the job in Gulf Shores, Alabama. So I've been in Alabama now for 15 years. So all told, I've been a chief now on three departments and a deputy chief for 9 years before that.
Wow. And how long was the Gulf Shores, Alabama run?
15 years. 15 years. Actually, I had enough accumulated time that they're still paying me, but that's, that's
wow,
okay.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And Pelham's lucky to have you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Chief Hughes, give us your story.
Well, when Ed had an earring and long hair, I was still in high school. So I don't know if we could start with that or.
Sure. Holy
smokes, you've been around a long time. No, it is funny, and I respect the hell out of Ed because I'm listening to a story, and I want to say ditto again. Not every department, but I was 16 years old. I joined an Explorer post. I was an Explorer until I was 18. I was a mall Marine. A mall cop, mall Marine for about 4 years. I worked third shift in the mall, went to the police academy at night. I entered the academy when I was 20 and a half. The day I turned 21, I started in a 1 square mile town near Cincinnati where nothing ever happens. Did that for a couple years, went to a larger suburban department where a lot of stuff happened, which is where I tell all my cool cop stories. I was an FTO, became a supervisor, ran a street crimes team for a number of years, left there to be an assistant chief in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio, was not there long when this position opened up here where I'm currently at. I'm going into my 10th year here as the chief. So it's funny. I have not heard Ed's story in a while, but it was funny as he's telling the story. I'm like, my God, it could be my dad. Sorry.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
My father, God rest his soul, my father was in the Marine Corps, and my dad died when he was 49. I was 22 years old. And people ask me, why'd you get in law enforcement? And I think it was my dad. Like, I knew it was something I always wanted to do. And I think I just remember my dad was very involved in the community and civic groups and that type of thing, giving back and blah, blah, blah. I won't bore you with all that. But, my dad died when I was a part-time cop. He never got to see me, elevate to where I am now. But one of the things I also did on the side was I taught in the police academy and I ran an advanced training division, if you will, at a vocational school. And one of my jobs was to bring in outside training to provide to cops. And I'm sitting in my office one day and a fax comes through for this drug interdiction class by a company that I didn't recognize the name of the company at the time. I do now. But at the time I didn't really recognize the name. And Ed, who I didn't know, was the instructor. So I too like to do interdiction and like to be a proactive cop. So I reached out to the company and said, hey, would you want to bring this class to Cincinnati, Ohio? And they said, yeah. So fast forward, Ed shows up and he teaches his drug interdiction class, blew it out of the water. We went to lunch and he said, hey, you ever thought about traveling the country teaching? And I thought, I thought about it a lot, but here I am.
Yeah.
And that's when I met Ed, and that was back in 2012.
Wow.
So it's funny, Jack and John, that, you come across my article, Jack, you reach out to Ed, the Scott Hughes guy. Yeah, for about 15 years.
I know.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised actually, but it is a small world. Yeah, we all know that.
It's a small world, but I talked earlier, and I'll let you go back to your questions, but I talked earlier about mentors and people you trust and bouncing things off of, and you're looking at one of mine right there on the screen. You got to have these people, and I bust his chops for being around as long as he has, but he's impacted me and other people in this profession more than he'll probably ever realize. And those are the kind of people you got to align yourself with. That's what makes you successful. So
absolutely.
Thanks, Ed.
That's kind of you to say. Thank you.
Yep. I'll Venmo. You can Venmo me later.
I will.
I think we talked quite a bit about leaving wherever it is we are better than we found it. And I think that speaks to the need for two things. One, to find a mentor, as a young police officer, young person, to elevate you, like you talked about, Scott, but two, being the mentor. Once you get to the position where you can actually affect change and help someone up through the ranks behind you, it's incumbent upon us to do that. Can you guys talk about the importance of both of those roles?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. I'll tell you, back in the day when I was applying for law enforcement jobs, if you went into an interview and you were asked that age-old question, where you want to be in 5 years, and you said, well, I want to be a federal agent, or I wanted to, go into the military and do whatever after I get this kind of experience, they would have said, well, good luck with that. And you would not have been hired. And we were very parochial then, right? And I think part of one of the things we have to do now in terms of changing the way we look at things is we are dealing with a different generation that are probably not necessarily coming in like a lot of us were, thinking I'm going to work here for 30 years and retire. And they may have those other things. And I think we should embrace that. So, for instance, I had a young lady who had just been hired as a police officer, had been in the Marine Corps Reserves, and came in and said, Chief, I've got an opportunity to go be a Black Hawk pilot in the military. And but I really love the idea of being a police officer and staying here. What should I do? And I said, well, police work will be here when you get done with that. You go, if I'm taking off my chief hat right now and talking to you as if I was your father. You go get that helicopter experience. You go get that military experience. Law enforcement will be here when you come back. Now, I could have been selfish and said, no, stay here. And I look at it the same way. If somebody comes in telling us, hey, I want to be a DEA agent in a few years, but I want that local experience. We're not only going to embrace that, we're going to help them do that. Right. And when an agency like that, or those other agencies that we look at, hire somebody that has been with my agency, it just tells me I've been hiring the right people and mentoring the right people. Now, having said that, several people will come into your organization and will say, that's what I want to do. But then they decide, well, you know what? I really like it here, and I've established a family here, and I want to stay here. And you all benefit from that. You can't look at it the way we used to look at it anymore. I think that's a big part of the way we need to adapt to how it was in 1979, 1982.
Yeah. Scott, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly. Thank you. I agree. You can't take it personal that if folks leave, like, okay, I had a guy on my own podcast not too long ago that talked about, if I can keep people for 5 years, I consider that good. And in some ways he was tongue in cheek, but in other ways, he was right. It's the job market's just different today. For the longest time when I was here, we didn't really lose anybody. And lately we've lost a few people for various reasons. And I don't take it personal anymore. It's to Ed's point, it's just a different generation. But I do agree, if someone comes in and says, hey, this is where I want to take my career, I believe we owe it to them to help them achieve that. And what can we do to assist them in that endeavor? I'm proud of the department I spent about 16 and a half, almost 17 years at, which is, again, a very busy department just outside of Cincinnati. They turned out no less than, of the 50, 55 folks that work there, maybe 60 now, just in like my time there in the years that I was at the end of my career there when I left, they turned out probably 5 or 6 police chiefs. They turned out Secret Service agents. They turned out a United States Marshal. They've turned out folks who have left and are now supervisors in other departments. And like, when I see the former chiefs from that department, I remind them, man, take pride in that, because that's the reputation you want to leave behind is, yeah, I might have lost these 4 or 5 guys and I hate to see them go, but they're all chiefs now. We got one guy's a city manager. Again, like that's a great accomplishment, and people should be proud of that. Because the flip side of that is, why are you losing all these people and they're not leaving to make themselves better? They're just leaving. That's a whole different message than leaving for better opportunities or for a career advancement, right, whatever the case might be.
Yeah. Just the fact that officers would come to you and say, hey, chiefs, I've got this opportunity. That shows the trust that they have in you. No matter what that opportunity is, many, if they don't trust the chief, they're not going to come talk to you about that. They're just going to do it. They're either going to, I'm just going to stay, or they're going, I'm going to be a Black Hawk pilot. I'm not even going to ask the chief's opinion. The fact that they came to talk to you and get your opinion, that says a lot. And same thing for you, Scott. People coming to you and saying, hey, I'm thinking about DEA or this or that. Hey, that's great. That's a whole different world. You do understand that. You mentor them in that way and make sure that they're doing it with their eyes wide open, because let's face it, as you have experience of many, many, many years, you know some things that maybe they don't know about going to do that other job. That grass is always greener isn't always greener, Right. And maybe you tell them, hey, I will be sad to lose you, but you are aware of this and this. And they say, yep, I'm aware of that. Well, then great. I'm supporting you, but at least they go into it with their eyes open. Right. Because I've seen, and you have seen, I'm sure, people leave and they just go, oh my God, that was a mistake. I should have stayed put, No doubt. No doubt.
And then you bring them back.
Yeah.
If that happens,
Sure.
if they do go fully informed and or not, if they're a good troop, bring them back. Don't hold it against them.
I'm one of those, by the way. I'm one of those. A lot of people don't know that about me, but I left after 4 years of LAPD. I left reluctantly and moved back to Pennsylvania, where an ex-wife begged me to. Notice the ex is there. Begged me to move back. I caved in, and I'll never forget going to my sergeant, Jack Davenport, one of my favorite sergeants of all time, and telling him, hey, I'm leaving. And he fell down into his chair. I mean, he couldn't believe it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll never forget his response. He said, I hate what you just said, but what are you going to do? And is there anything I can do for you? He did that. And I left for 1 year and 3 months, got divorced, and back I went. I bolted back, and the rest is history. I'm so thankful that I did. And in some ways it benefited me, but so I can relate to that. I mean, I avoided going to talk to people about that because I thought that they'd just say, you're an idiot. And I kind of was. I would have deserved that, but they didn't. They supported it and talked to me about it. So what are you going to do? Are you sure that's what you want to do? Are you doing it for the right reasons? And then I told them the reasons, and they said, family first. I'm like, wow, they made that decision a little bit easier on me. So I can relate to that firsthand. And it's very important that you handle it the way that both of you do.
You'll never forget that conversation with him. It obviously means a lot to you.
Never forget.
And it speaks so highly of you, because he would not have had that reaction if you were, some recalcitrant.
Well,
right?
I worked hard for him. He was a great story. He has passed, but you mention his name to anybody that works 77th Street, and you say Jack Davenport, and they all go, man, everyone loved him. He was a really good. He was a sergeant too with a rocker, so he was an assistant watch commander. Just a great man. Somebody you could go to with any issue, any problem, anything, and he would listen and work it out with reason and common sense, and he's just a great guy. I never saw him get mad. He'd get stern, but I never saw him explode. He just was a calm, cool customer. I loved him. But let me ask you this. I'll go back to you, Ed, and say, this is kind of it's not a trick question. I asked this to Jim McDonnell when we had Chief McDonnell on from LAPD. You've both gone through all the ranks. Ed, tell me, what was your favorite supervisory level? I know you were both loved being street cops, but supervisor level, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, whatever, all the way to chief. What was your favorite rank, and why was it your favorite rank?
Sergeant, no doubt, because I could pick my battles to a degree. Selfishly, I could go on the cool calls that I wanted to go on, or where you needed a sergeant to show up. The bigger stuff. I didn't have to go on some of the more menial things because those were going to be handled. And I could still be out there with the troops, taking care of my troops. And again, selfishly, when you're a patrol sergeant running a squad, or a watch commander in a small department running a squad on the street, you take care of your business for 8 or 12 hours a day, and then you're done. You go home and you don't have that stack of work still sitting on your desk. It's not like now, in this booger eater job I have where it never ends. You go home and all that's done, and then you just go back out and get to do it again. And I was a sergeant fairly young, so I was still hair on fire law enforcement. And I'll tell you that chief that we hired right after I got promoted, as a sergeant, I made an arrest where I seized a couple of guns from a couple of gangbangers and got some dope. And he called me into the office, and I thought, here we go. Because in the past on that agency, it would have been, hey, you're a sergeant. Don't need to be tying yourself out there making arrests. And it was just the opposite. He said, hey, you proved that sergeants could go out and do proactive police work too. Keep it up. Mind blown. And again, something that I copied and continued to copy later on, the way he handled that and encouraged me. Because there's nothing wrong with a street supervisor leading by example and doing those things.
Right. Scott, same thing. What rank?
Yeah, same answer. I'll say it one step further. At the time, I was the agency's youngest sergeant ever promoted. They since promoted someone younger than me after I left. He is now the assistant chief. And when I ran I'm going to call it the street crimes team. That's not what it was called, but basically it's what we did. I got to learn a different side of policing. I was surrounded by people. The 3 detectives who worked for me had all done undercover work, and I'd never done it. So I got to learn a lot about being a cop, and I got to learn from them, which was really interesting in the beginning because it created some leadership lessons for me that made me better long term. And in short, what I mean by that is I had no idea what they were doing, so I was intimidated, which caused my leadership style to change a little bit until we had what I'm going to call a come to Jesus talk one day where they called me in, they sat me down, and they basically said, hey, you have to trust us. Do we know what we're doing? You trust us, we'll make you look good. And that I paraphrased hours-long conversation into that, but that conversation really helped change the trajectory, of my career and the leader that I became. All 3 of those individuals would end up getting promoted. They would all get promoted out of the unit, and 2 of them became a police chief. One still at that agency, and one at another department, and the third one is the assistant chief. And I look back and I take great pride in the fact that I helped them way back then get to where they all ended up going. So that's my favorite rank was sergeant, in particular in the street crimes team.
Yeah, I would have guessed for both of you that was going to be it. That was my guess. I didn't know, but and for the same reasons that you said, you have a lot of impact as a sergeant. I mean, a lot of impact,
good and bad.
That's
good
right.
And bad.
That is exactly right. I mean, I've think back, and I've worked for some incredible sergeants, and I have worked for some pathetic sergeants. I mean, which had no business even being cops, much less a sergeant. But the good ones, oh my gosh, they're gold. They're right there for you, and you learn from them. And was that your experience in Ontario, John? Did you, with the sergeant rank, did you find that to be really helpful for you?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Yeah, super impactful. And the ones that I recall the most are the ones that, as you guys described, helped me get to where I wanted to go. You know, when I wanted to go to aviation, there was some disappointment on their behalf because they were sad to see me go, because once you go to aviation, you're probably not coming back because it's Shangri-La.
Unless you're crazy.
At the same time, they supported that move and helped me get there. But Scott, you touched on something that I want to pick your brain on for a second. You talked about going into a unit that you had no experience in. In our industry, in aviation, that happens very frequently. You have a unit commander come in overseeing an aviation program with little, if any, aviation experience. They find themselves in a difficult spot, right? So what advice would you offer to someone who finds themselves in that position to be an effective leader coming into something you don't know a whole lot about?
The first thing is admit that you know nothing about what you're getting ready to step into. Don't come in there acting like you know what you don't know. These men and women have been doing this for who knows how long. They're used to this rotation. They might be looking at you as this is just a stepping stone. You're only in aviation because you're trying to get here. This is where the opening is, and seniority put you here, blah, 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 blah. The same thing I would tell folks who want to become chiefs, want to promote. Go in there and be a sponge and soak it all up. Take it all in. And someone told me this one time. They said, Chief, let's build on your sponge theory. After you've set that sponge down there for 30, 60, 90 days, take that sponge and wring it out and put the sponge back out and soak up another 30 or 45 days worth of stuff. Because sometimes what you're going to find is people have agendas. People are trying to get things done that benefits them. So you might see and hear things that in the first 30, 45, 60 days aren't really a problem. So wring that sponge out and really get a good idea of what's left, right? One thing that was taught to me as a sergeant that I've carried with me, when you take over a new team, a new unit, a division, you meet with every one of your employees individually. You carve out time to meet with them all. You have a series of questions you're going to ask them. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it here? What would you change? What would you keep the same? If you were me for a day, what would you do first? Whatever your questions are, ask those questions to everybody in that division. Write down the answers. When you get through the whole division, lay all your pieces of paper out. Highlight the commonalities. Here's what you're going to find out. Communication is going to be the top of the list. Nobody knows what's going on around here unless you happen to be walking through at the right time and see the chief, see the sergeant, see the lieutenant. Nobody knows if you work third shift. They forget about us out here. If communication is what's on your piece of paper, then you address it. How do you address it? You send out a weekly update to your entire staff about things going on. Just communicate, right? Establish those relationships. You walk into if I got assigned aviation, I don't know what I would do, right? I mean, I don't know, right? Let's go fly. I don't know. Show what this thing does. You know what I mean? But I'm not afraid to admit I have no idea. Let me take you back circa 2000, whenever that was. I didn't do that when I went in that street crimes team, and that's where I failed. Yeah. Because I was afraid if I showed weakness, they wouldn't view me as the supervisor, and they wouldn't have respect for me, and it backfired. So I'd be asking all the questions I can ask and tell them why I'm asking the questions. Plus, that shows them that you value them, right? I'm not asking questions because I'm stupid. I'm asking questions because I have never flown an airplane, a helicopter, or whatever the heck we're flying over here. I don't know, right? I think you show that you're human and they'll respect you more instead of you coming in like a know-it-all, which I've seen before.
Oh, yeah.
I digress. Did I answer your question, John?
No, yeah, I love it.
Hey, John, I think, another thing I think we need to do more in law enforcement is look at other organizations. And I think your question begs the look at the military. The 90-day wonder new lieutenant officer. relying on his NCO, because the NCO knows what's going on, right? And we've seen that lesson again and again and again in the military, and we don't necessarily do it all the time in law enforcement. But that guy who just got out of Quantico or wherever as a military officer absolutely has to rely on that NCO who's really been there a long time, or that gunnery sergeant that's been running that unit and knows exactly what it needs and is the expert really. And even though they don't have the formal rank of officer.
Identifying those SMEs, I think is critical. Moving into a new
important
spot and then relying on them, like you talked about. Scott, one thing you brought up that I'll reflect on for a minute is something that Terry Mauchi, one of our friends from Bell, talks about a lot. He was a unit commander at Arizona DPS, and he said he would sit down with his employees and ask them, and I always mess it up, but I'll paraphrase it. What do you need? What do you like? And what makes you mad? And those three questions he asks a standard across the board. And I think to your point, Scott, if you can identify trends through those three questions, really insightful, right? So I'd love that you guys brought that up. Ed, thanks for your insight too, because I feel like we often silo ourselves into I need to look at like things. I need to look at other law enforcement agencies to come up with a solution that might apply to where I'm at versus let's look at other public safety agencies outside of law enforcement or the military, or even let's look at the corporate world. How does what they've learned and what they've done apply to what we do, and how do we make ourselves better? So love that insight and that perspective. That's really key.
So glad you asked that, John. I was thinking about it, and I knew you'd read my mind because you're good at that. Because that's one of my pet peeves. I wrote a whole article about what we're talking about, and I look back and say, well, in my 31 years in LA, I probably had 25 plus captains, which captains, they run the show at least, and I had two that jump out as the absolute worst. And then one was at air support, and he was my last captain when I retired. He made it easy to walk away, I'll tell you that. But I look at what they had in common: arrogance, not listening to SMEs, not asking a single question, trying to change the world. I mean, just these stupid things. All they have to do is come in and be that sponge. Oh, the sponge analogy is so cool. And bringing it out, I've never heard that one, Scott. I like that. I add that to it.
Soak it back up.
He should have ran out about 50 sponges. Yeah. Because air support, canine, SWAT, bomb squad, specialized detective bureaus. If you've not worked those jobs, and most supervisors that go to them haven't, you better be a sponge, or you're going to be ineffective and you're going to just piss people off. I mean, the fact that I'm still hot about those two captains, and they were 30 years apart, just shows you how important this topic is, especially with specialized. It's just something you just got to come in humble and willing to learn.
You guys had Campbell on not too long ago from Louisville.
Yes,
and
Chief Campbell's great.
And he really is. I've met him. I was at a conference he spoke at, and he said, the more you promote up and you get to the level of police chief, you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're not an expert. You may have been a subject matter expert in one small area of your agency, but when you become a chief, that goes away, and you rely on those people to know what they're doing and to guide you, and that happens every day. Chief
Campbell, he was a SWAT guy. I mean, he knew the SWAT angle, but now he's got to run an air support unit, a canine unit. He knows a little bit about them because of his SWAT time, but does he know the ins and outs and the rules and the federal regulations that for an air unit? No.
Yeah.
No. We had this captain say, well, I know you guys decided not to do that mission today, but for training, but if it was real, you'd have to go do it. And we said, no, it would be against the federal aviation regulations. And believe it or not, they trump the rules, the manual, the police manual. And he was offended by that. Just little things like that. It's like, why not ask, and learn? But wow, don't get me going.
Arrogance.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's a simple word. It's arrogance. And arrogance and leadership, they do not mix. It's okay to have an ego, but you can't be arrogant about it.
I had a chief tell me one time, there's a difference between cocky and confidence.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, there's times where you need to be, you may have to come across cocky if you're trying to control a scene or confident, but leadership, you really got to understand the difference between those two.
That's a good one. That is really good. All right. So let's go back to you, Chief Hughes. Tell us about Hamilton Township Police Department. Give us the thumbnail of personnel, units, population, any stats you want to share about Hamilton Township in Ohio.
Yeah, so we're your typical suburb. We're between Cincinnati and Columbus. We're 36 or so square miles. We got about 35,000 residents. Townships in Ohio are just like cities and villages. The only reason they're called townships is we're funded a little different. We're funded primarily through property taxes. We do not collect earnings taxes. With that being said, because we are property tax based and not earning tax based, we are very conservative with how we spend our money. So we are very lean in that regard. But having said that, we offer multiple SRO spots. We have 2 detectives. We have a canine. We're part of the countywide SWAT team. We have an officer assigned to the countywide drug task force. We have drone operators. We have traffic action reconstructionists. We have folks who can dissect cell phones. So all of that to say, we try to do as much as we can within the restrictions that we have for obvious reasons. And I'm proud. When I got here in 2016, we had 16 or 17 folks, and now we're at 31. Wow. So we've more than doubled, and it hasn't been easy at times, but here we are. So we are one of the fastest growing suburbs in the state. And fortunately for us, we're also ranked as consistently one of the safest in the state, which is great because that's not where I came from. So It's been a great change. But, I always say it doesn't matter where you work, things happen. We have homicides. I had a double officer involved shooting where they shot and killed a guy in domestic a few years ago. So we're not immune to problems. They're just not in your face as often as some places.
Right.
Yes, we've talked about that, Jack, quite a bit. When as far as preparing for a critical incident, like you said, it doesn't matter where you work. The worst thing in the world could happen in the nicest place in the world.
And it does.
And it does. Yeah. So I like that you brought that up. It's critical for us to talk through and think through a lot of things that we don't necessarily think we might respond to.
Yeah.
But
and it also goes to I have to work harder to remind elected officials, public, business owners that, we're safe, but right. I also have to work hard internally to remind my officers that it can and it does happen here. Ed will agree that when you're around violence a lot, it's more, it's in your head all the time. Like, hey, it might happen, but the further you're removed from that violence, I think it's easier to quote unquote assume it's not going to happen. So I have to work extra hard from a training perspective to keep our guys and gals on their toes because they're not seeing that every single day.
Right.
So it presents those challenges as well.
Yeah. You're talking about complacency, right?
Yeah. And I hate to say, I almost feel like it's complacent to say complacency at times because we hear it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you have to work harder to remind them that it can and it has happened.
That's right.
And it'll happen again. Just a matter of time.
I used to I cover this in my class regularly where I say, you pick any year and go down the list of officers killed in line of duty and where that is any year. And you look at the places where it happened. And I challenge you, unless you're some geography major, you will not recognize 80% of those communities. Is that, you know what that's called in police work? A clue that this stuff happens everywhere. One that I always remember is Monk's Corner, South Carolina. Double officer killing. Monk's Corner. Had to look it up. Where the heck is that? How big is it? The bad things can happen anywhere. And that's why complacency, can really hurt you, hurt you. Very important point, Chief. Good stuff.
I think the correlation there to aviation, there's twofold. One, you think about our complacency when it comes to weather. We both flew in Southern California and our weather's pretty vanilla. You go fly and the assumption is, it's probably F or VFR everywhere. I don't have to worry about weather. It's probably going to be fine. And then you look out there, you get airborne, like, the Marine lader's coming in. Oh, it's coming in faster than I thought.
Yeah.
So I think that complacency sets in there. And then the other side of that is especially if you're flying a H-125, the accident rates are so low in those aircraft. I think the complacency side of you is like, probably good. Probably don't need to worry about making sure I'm up to par in my auto rotations every quarter and the things that go with that. But as you brought up, Scott, the absence of that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? You still got to be prepared. Sure. So just wanted to kind of tie those two things together.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you to our sponsor, AEM. Their revolutionary MTP-136D P25 aerial firefighting radio is U.S. Forest Service approved. It's in stock and ready to ship. Grounded unexpectedly? No problem. AEM stocking dealers across North America are prepared to support all your mission-critical needs. Visit aem-corp.com/radio.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Chief Ed Delmore and Chief Scott Hughes. Spending time talking with these two chiefs, it's immediately clear they are leaders in every sense of the word. Leaders who truly lead from the front and by example. They exude passion for the profession and pride in the work, not only as chiefs, but as instructors, authors, and mentors who continue to shape the future of law enforcement. Their commitment to doing what's right and developing the next generation of leaders is evident in everything they do. The Hangar Z Podcast sincerely thanks Chief Delmore and Chief Hughes for their service, their leadership, and everything they continue to give back to the law enforcement community. Join us for a fantastic episode 2, where we learn more about leadership philosophies on a variety of topics. Stay safe, and we'll catch you the next time on the Hangar Z Podcast.